Throughout history, there have been individuals set apart, divinely chosen to bring about profound change. These are not merely heroes or figures of legend, they are the chosen ones, anointed by God to act as beacons of light in a world often shrouded in shadow. Their journeys are not easy, they are filled with trials, moments of deep isolation, and periods of profound transformation. Yet, through it all, they emerge as catalysts for divine purposes, sent to reshape the world around them. To be chosen is to be set apart, to bear a responsibility that stretches beyond one's own life and touches the very fabric of the community, even the world. It is both a gift and a burden, one that invites both suffering and divine glory. In the hands of the chosen ones, God works His miracles, using their lives as vessels of His transformative power. Just as light dispels darkness, the chosen ones illuminate paths previously unseen, guiding others toward a higher truth, toward God. In the Bible, these chosen individuals are often those who least expect such a calling, those who, in the world's eyes, seem unprepared or unworthy. Yet it is precisely in their weakness that God's strength is revealed. The stories of Moses, Jesus, and the prophets remind us that being chosen is not about being perfect, but about being willing to surrender, to grow, and to allow God's grace to work through us. Their stories mirror our own spiritual journeys, filled with highs and lows, moments of clarity and deep inner struggle. Today, as we reflect on the roles of these chosen ones, we open our hearts to the possibility that we, too, are called to be instruments of transformation in our own lives and the lives of those around us. Let us begin this journey together, exploring the profound spiritual calling of the chosen ones and their transformative impact on both the world and their own souls. The chosen ones in the Bible, agents of divine transformation. Moses stands as one of the clearest examples of a chosen one, a man called from a life of obscurity into the monumental task of liberating an entire nation. He was not a natural leader, nor was he eager to take on such a burden. Yet, in his isolation in the wilderness, tending sheep far from the halls of power, God spoke to him from a burning bush, an unmistakable sign of divine purpose. Moses' journey was not just one of physical liberation, but of spiritual transformation. His isolation in the desert, away from the distractions of Egypt, prepared him for a life of intimate communion with God. He was refined in solitude, learning humility, patience, and the deep faith required to lead God's people through the Red Sea and beyond. In many ways, his story teaches us that the chosen ones must often be stripped of earthly attachments and pride before they can be used as agents of divine transformation. Through Moses, we see that isolation is not abandonment, but preparation. God chose Moses not because of his confidence, but because of his willingness to listen. Moses' insecurities and doubts were overshadowed by the divine call, showing us that when God calls, he equips. As a chosen one, Moses became a liberator, leading others out of slavery and into freedom, much like how we, when chosen by God, are called to lead others out of spiritual bondage into the light of truth. At the heart of the Bible's narrative stands Jesus, the ultimate chosen one, the embodiment of grace, love, and transformation. Jesus' mission was not simply to challenge the status quo or offer moral teachings. He came to bring about the greatest transformation of all, the reconciliation of humanity with God. His ministry was marked by moments of profound love and divine grace, through which lives were changed and hearts were healed. Jesus' life teaches us that transformation begins not with force, but with love. He healed the sick, raised the dead, and forgave sinners, showing that God's transformative power flows through acts of compassion and grace. His parables and teachings reflect a deep understanding of the human condition. He knew the struggles, the fears, and the shadows we face. Yet, he calls us to be the light, reminding us in Matthew 5 verses 14 to 16 that we are the light of the world, and that through him, we can illuminate even the darkest places. Jesus' path was not without suffering. He faced rejection, betrayal, and ultimately the cross. But even in his darkest hour, he chose love. His sacrifice became the ultimate act of transformation, turning death into life, and despair into hope. As chosen ones, we are called to walk in the same light, to reflect his grace and love in all that we do. The prophets of the Bible were often misunderstood and rejected by their communities, yet their voices were essential in guiding Israel back to God. These men and women were chosen to speak truth in times of spiritual darkness, acting as catalysts for both cultural and spiritual transformation. From Elijah to Jeremiah, Isaiah to Ezekiel, their messages were often difficult to hear, as they called for repentance, justice, and a return to the covenant. The prophets remind us that being chosen does not always mean being popular or accepted. It often involves standing alone, confronting the shadows in society, and pointing people back to God's light. Their courage in the face of opposition is a testament to their unwavering faith and trust in God's plan. They were not just messengers, they were instruments of divine change, turning the hearts of nations back to their Creator. Like the prophets, we too are called to be catalysts in our own time. Though the world may resist or misunderstand, we must remain steadfast in our mission, trusting that God's light will shine through us, even in the darkest moments. The nature of spiritual transformation, light and shadow. The chosen ones are not simply individuals who carry out tasks. They are lights set on a hill, meant to illuminate the world with the truth and love of God. In Matthew 5 verses 14 to 16, Jesus speaks these powerful words. "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." This calling to be the light of the world is a profound one, and it illustrates the essence of what it means to be a chosen one. The light we carry is not our own. It is a reflection of God's glory, shining through us to guide others toward His presence. In every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every moment of grace, the chosen ones illuminate the path toward spiritual transformation. Yet light cannot exist without the contrast of darkness. The very nature of light is to confront and dispel the shadows, to bring clarity where confusion once reigned. The chosen ones are not afraid of the darkness. They are sent into it. Whether it's the darkness of fear, doubt, sin, or despair, the light we carry pierces through, bringing hope and healing to those who have lost their way. In our own lives, we are called to shine brightly in whatever corner of the world God has placed us. As chosen ones, we illuminate not just with our words but with our lives, pointing always toward the source of our light, Jesus, the light of the world. But spiritual transformation is not just about basking in the light. It also requires us to confront the shadows within and around us. Every chosen one must walk through moments of darkness, those times when it feels as though God is distant, and the weight of the world presses heavy on the soul. These shadows, however, are not meant to destroy us. They are part of the refining process, the crucible through which we are purified and prepared for greater things. In the life of Jesus, we see this vividly in His time in the wilderness, where He faced temptation and spiritual battles alone, Matthew 4 verses 1 to 11. Similarly, we see it in the lives of the prophets who, like Jeremiah, lamented deeply the darkness around them, yet continued to speak truth even in the face of despair, Jeremiah 20 verse 9. Confronting the shadow does not mean succumbing to it. It means acknowledging its presence, understanding its source, and bringing it into the light of God's truth. The process of transformation often involves wrestling with our own fears, weaknesses, and sins, those parts of us that hide in the shadows. But in bringing them to God, we allow His grace to transform even our darkest places into something beautiful and redeemed. The journey of the chosen one is one of constant confrontation with both light and shadow, for it is through these battles that we are strengthened, refined, and made more like Christ. It is in the darkness that we learn to rely not on our own strength, but on God's light to guide us. And as we emerge from these shadows, we are not the same. We are transformed, more equipped to fulfill the divine purpose set before us. Isolation as preparation for transformation. In the journey of the chosen ones, isolation is not a punishment but a divine invitation to deeper intimacy with God. Throughout the Bible, we see that the desert, a place of vast emptiness and solitude, is often where God calls His chosen ones to prepare them for their mission. The desert is a symbolic place where distractions fall away, and one is left with only the voice of God. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, away from the noise of Egypt, before being called to lead the Israelites. The desert became the place where his heart was refined, where he learned the ways of God in the stillness. Similarly, the Israelites themselves wandered in the desert for 40 years before entering the Promised Land, a time of both physical and spiritual purification. Even Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days, where he fasted and prayed, facing the temptations of the enemy and emerging victorious. This period of isolation was not a time of abandonment, but one of preparation for his public ministry. Matthew 4 verses 1 to 11. The desert, or seasons of isolation, serves as a place of stripping away, removing the distractions, the pride, and the comforts we cling to so that we may be fully reliant on God. It is in these quiet moments of solitude where the chosen ones learn to listen deeply, to trust in the unseen, and to walk by faith. It is often in the desert that God shapes the heart, preparing it for the challenges and victories that lie ahead. We, too, must embrace our own seasons of isolation, understanding that they are not times of loss but seasons of growth. In the silence, we can hear God's voice more clearly, and in the solitude, we are prepared for the transformation that will come. Isolation has a divine purpose. It is a time set apart to strengthen our connection with God. The chosen ones often experience this deep sense of being alone, yet it is in this space that they come to know God in ways they never could in the crowds or amidst the noise of everyday life. It is here, in the solitude, that God reveals himself most intimately. Think of Elijah, who, after a great victory on Mount Carmel, fled into the wilderness, weary and alone. It was there, under the shade of a broom tree, that God spoke to him in a gentle whisper, reassuring him of his presence and his plan. 1 Kings 19 verses 11 to 13. Elijah's isolation was a time of rest and restoration, preparing him for the next phase of his journey. Isolation allows us to encounter God without distractions, to learn to rely on his voice above all others. It is a time of deep spiritual healing, where God can tend to the wounds we often overlook in the busyness of life. In these moments, we are reminded that we are never truly alone, for God is always with us, shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for what is to come. For the chosen ones, isolation is not the end of the story. It is a necessary pause, a time to be filled with divine strength so that they may return to their mission with renewed purpose and clarity. The desert is not a place of abandonment but a place of encounter, a place where God's presence becomes all the more real and transformative. Transformation through grace and forgiveness. One of the most profound stories of transformation through grace and forgiveness in the Bible is that of Joseph. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, Joseph's journey was filled with betrayal, injustice, and isolation. Yet, through it all, God's hand was upon him, preparing him for a higher purpose. Joseph's story reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, God can work all things for good. Though Joseph suffered greatly, his suffering was not in vain. It was the very process through which God elevated him to a position of great authority in Egypt, allowing him to save not only a nation but also his family. His journey, marked by false accusations, imprisonment, and loneliness, was a crucible of transformation that refined his character and deepened his faith. When Joseph finally faced his brothers, the ones responsible for his years of suffering, he did not respond with anger or vengeance. Instead, he responded with grace and forgiveness. In Genesis 50 verse 20, Joseph speaks these powerful words to his brothers. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Through Joseph's story, we learn that true transformation often involves letting go of bitterness and embracing forgiveness. It is in forgiving those who have wronged us that we are set free, allowing God's grace to flow through us. Joseph's ability to forgive not only transformed his own life but also restored his family, reconciling relationships that had been broken by betrayal. As chosen ones, we are called to walk in this same spirit of grace and forgiveness. Though the world may hurt us, and though we may face moments of deep injustice, God asks us to forgive, to trust in His higher plan, and to allow His transformative grace to shape our hearts. Like Joseph, We may not always understand the purpose of our trials, but we can trust that God is working through them to bring about something far greater than we could ever imagine. Mercy and grace are at the heart of spiritual transformation. The chosen ones are not perfect. They are flawed, human, and often stumble along their journey. Yet, it is through God's unending mercy and grace that they are continually shaped and renewed. Consider the Apostle Paul, once a persecutor of Christians, who encountered the grace of Jesus on the road to Damascus. His life was radically transformed, not because of anything he did to deserve it, but because of the mercy of God. Paul's transformation was not instant. It was a process, one that involved deep repentance, humility, and a reliance on God's grace to carry him through his mission. This pattern of grace is woven throughout the Bible. David, a man after God's own heart, was not without sin, yet he found grace and mercy in God's presence, allowing him to rise from his failures and continue his purpose. Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, was restored through grace and became one of the pillars of the early church. The role of mercy and grace is essential in the lives of the chosen ones. It is not through their own strength that they accomplish their divine purpose, but through God's grace working in and through them. Grace empowers us to forgive, to heal, and to be transformed. It is the divine fuel that carries us through the moments of weakness, reminding us that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. As chosen ones, we are invited to live in the constant flow of God's mercy and grace. In our journey of transformation, we must continually return to His grace, allowing it to renew us, heal us, and propel us toward the fulfillment of our divine purpose. The mission of the chosen ones, preparing for a greater purpose. Every chosen one is called not only for their own spiritual journey but to fulfill a greater purpose in the divine plan. Their lives are a reflection of God's ability to take ordinary people and shape them into vessels of extraordinary impact. This preparation often takes time, and it is marked by moments of both triumph and trial. But through every step, God is at work, preparing the chosen ones for something greater than they can comprehend. In the story of David, we see this truth unfold. David was anointed as king while still a young shepherd boy. He was chosen by God for greatness, but he did not ascend to the throne immediately. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness, hiding from Saul, learning to trust in God's timing and provision. During this period, God was shaping David's character, teaching him to lead with humility, compassion, and a heart fully surrendered to God. David's time of preparation was not wasted. It was a season that equipped him for the greater purpose God had in store for him as the king of Israel. Similarly, our seasons of waiting and preparation are not meaningless. They are divinely orchestrated times where God is molding us, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for the mission ahead. God's calling always leads to something greater than we can see in the moment. Like David, Moses, and Esther, we must trust that even in the waiting, even in the wilderness, God is preparing us for the fulfillment of a divine purpose that will not only change our lives but will also impact the world around us. One of the greatest challenges for the chosen ones is learning to trust the process of transformation. Often, the path to fulfilling God's purpose is filled with uncertainty, and it can be difficult to see how the struggles, the isolation, and the trials fit into the greater plan. But God asks us to trust Him, to believe that He is working all things together for good. Romans 8 verse 28, even when we cannot yet see the full picture. The process of transformation requires patience and faith. Just as the potter carefully shapes the clay, God is shaping us, molding us into vessels fit for His purpose. But the clay must remain pliable, surrendered to the potter's hands. In the same way, we must surrender our lives to God, trusting that He knows the perfect timing and method for our transformation. Throughout the Bible, the chosen ones had to trust this process. Abraham was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, but he waited many years for the birth of Isaac. Joseph had dreams of greatness, but he endured betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment before seeing those dreams fulfilled. Even Jesus, in His humanity, walked the long road to the cross, trusting in the Father's will and plan. As we walk our own journey of transformation, we too must learn to trust. Trust that the trials we face are refining us. Trust that the moments of waiting are preparing us. and trust that God's timing is perfect. The mission of the chosen ones is not always easy, but it is always worth it. For in the end, we are not just being transformed for ourselves, we are being transformed for the sake of others, to be a light in the world, and to reflect God's love, grace, and truth. In trusting the process, we learn to walk by faith, knowing that God is faithful to complete the good work He has begun in us. Philippians 1 verse 6. And in that trust, we find peace, purpose, and the strength to fulfill the mission we were chosen for. The journey of the chosen ones is a path of light, transformation, and purpose. Each trial, moment of isolation, and step of faith is shaping you for something greater. God has called you to be a light in this world, and through His grace, you are being prepared to fulfill a divine purpose. Trust the process, surrender to His refining work, and step forward with confidence in His plan. If this message resonates with you, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future reflections. And for a deeper dive into this journey, I invite you to watch the next video. Unique challenges faced by the chosen ones. In it, we'll explore how the chosen ones not only face trials but overcome them, revealing the hidden strength that lies within those set apart by God. Continue your journey of discovery, and may God's light guide you every step of the way.